Hello, class. We are off to a great start. Last week was our first week. We had a really good week. I'm very impressed with the level of work that everyone's done. And I wanted to congratulate each of you once again for kicking off the week. You did a great job, and very impressed with the discussions, the papers, and where we are today. So thank you very much for all the hard work. Obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to get with me, and I will do everything I can to work with you. Most of the papers are graded, but now you should have those. I'm still working on the other ones for our first week, and should have those back very soon. So please take a look at those comments that I've included in those papers. I do that to help you in the future, and to help you grow and gather some information for our next assignment. So let's just take a look at a recap real quick. Again, I've sent this out via an announcement. Last week in Module 1, we identified several different definitions of terror and terrorism, and obviously everybody has one depending on the country and the organization that we deal with. I mean, we don't even have a real good definition here in the United States amongst the different agencies that deal with terrorism. We learned the difference between the words terror definition of terrorism and terrorist, what those mean. Terror means to terrorize, terrorism means to act, and then terrorists are the people that commit those acts, are involved with planning to some degree. We explored the purpose of terrorism and assessed some of the attended outcomes associated with terrorism and focused on the justifications used by terrorist organizations to organize and conduct attacks on civilian populations. Again, I think it was a really good week. So let's move on to our second week, if you can follow with me to Module 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to explore how terrorism began. We see in this module, in Module 2, in our reading, that terrorism has been around a long time. We identify and differentiate between domestic and international terrorism, but really back in the day, so to speak, in the Roman times, it was just terrorism that happened there locally. It was all kind of the same thing, if you will. And so, we saw during Roman times where really we had the different groups, the assassins, if you will. There was a Shiite Muslim sect, and they utilized terrorism for the same reasons that the Sicarii did. We talked about the Jewish Sicarii. Those guys fought in Palestine. They fought in Rome, and they were opposed to some of the Roman rule. And those guys were really good. They, from what I can read, and you would catch some of the terrorism in the module resources, those guys were really good. They fought well. They had plans. Obviously, their weapons of mass destruction were people. We didn't see explosives like we do today, but it was people. Vast amounts of people with swords and that sort of thing that would just go into a city or an area where the Romans were in and just attack them in mass sometimes. And then other times, like we see today with terrorism, it was lone wolves who would sneak in the night and assassinate different members of the Roman military, the Roman government. And so what this did is this spread fear amongst Roman soldiers and Roman citizens. The Jewish Sicarii, was able to reach them no matter what. They could reach them days, nights, whatever the case, no matter where they were at, they could be found by these terrorists, if you will, and executed. And so these are examples of both political and religious terrorism, because politically the Jewish settlers there in the homeland of what was then known as Palestine, it was all just Palestine then. Today it's divided, but then it was Palestine. Those guys were not happy about Roman rule. They didn't like the government. They didn't like the the religious implications that the Romans tried to bring about. In some cases, as we explore the things that happened during Roman rule, some of the Jewish religious groups are allowed to practice their religion, but only to a limited degree, as long as it did not restrict anything or involve or cause problems for the Roman government. They could, to a degree, they could carry out their religious beliefs and practice. And but this didn't always carry over, and so this is one of the reasons that the Jewish Sicarii actually started carrying out acts of terrorism, because they wanted to influence political change, they wanted their homeland back, and they wanted to influence religious change, because they didn't like what the Romans were doing. They didn't like the Roman religion. These guys are pagans, and all sorts of things there, and so they didn't like it, and so they fought to bring to get the Romans out of the territory so they could sort of have their own homeland. That carried on to what we see today in the Palestinian territories with Hamas and the PLO. Obviously, Palestine is divided today into different countries. Homeland there for Israel, and then we have the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and so fighting continues amongst that area even today. And that's one of the reasons I've asked in the discussion board question, how would you compare the past to today? What's the similarities there? And that's where it brings us to the assassins that I mentioned a moment ago. These guys are Shiite Muslims, utilized terrorism for the same reasons that the Sicarii did, to influence the political leadership there within the region. And today, it is quite possible that some of the techniques and the things that we learned that the assassins used of the old days, if you will, is being used today by Hamas. It's certainly for the same reasons, or similar reasons, and that they believe they should have their own homeland, and so they want to be able to drive out the Israelis and anyone else that opposes them, for that matter. And so they carry out different attacks. Now, we see those acts of terrorism being a little bit different, because with Hamas, we not only have acts of terrorism, but we also have sort of a military wing, if you will, that exists there within those Palestinian territories, if we could still call them that, and then even up into other countries, Lebanon and Cyprus and Jordan and those other areas. So we sort of see this military wing where they launch these rockets, and as well as carry out those acts of assassination or terrorism. So excuse me, and it is possible that in the future we could see this with other organizations. And I suspect today, if you take a look at ISIS or ISIL, if you will, they're sort of a military wing to that terrorist organization as well. So that's a subject for and a discussion for another time, but it's just something that you should think about, some of that connection between the terrorism of today and military operations. The thing that we tend to focus on terror groups based in the Middle East, but it's important to not forget that there are other groups throughout the world. Some of those go back a long, long ways in history. We can take a look at the thugs, the Fenians, the Chinese secret societies that carried out terrorism, during the rule, before I guess the takeover of Chinese, if you will. Back in the day, there was a monarchy there, and secret societies existed to oppose some of those different actions of the monarchy. And then Roman societies, we saw in the Roman societies some of those different organizations that took place and carried out different terrorism in Rome, and so on and so forth. What about in Ireland? We've seen some of the actions in the past, the terrorist actions that have taken place in Ireland. We read about that in our textbook. We see where the IRA, actually the Irish Republican Army, carried out attacks against the British military and the British law enforcement for many, many years, and they conducted terrorist operations inside the UK, including bombings of cafes, government buildings, killing law enforcement, etc. So those were things that could be considered domestic terrorism in the UK, if you will. So here in the United States, what do we have? We see some of those groups like the KKK, the Puerto Rican independence groups down in Puerto Rico. Those groups have been active for many years, not just historically as we read in the book, but also today. Some of those groups are still quite active, and since they, Puerto Rico is so far away, if you will, we just don't hear a great deal about it, but those groups are still there. In our book, we learn about the Weather Underground, how important the Weather Underground was for domestic terrorism, some of their goals related to anarchy, etc. The Black Liberation Army, and then there's a host of others. And again, we see those groups where they feel as if they need to either change the political government, the political situation we have in the United States today, or there's the religious fight, if you will. We see the white supremacists who really believe that there should be change. I guess ethnic groups should be separated into different areas of the country. So we have all these different groups that are either involved in international or domestic terrorism. Okay. The thing that I think you will see in the book is in our reading that we notice that we have the left and the right. Now, each day you wake up and you catch the paper, Fox News or CNN or whatever the case may be, wherever you get your news from, and you hear about left wing and right wing and Democrats and Republicans. Similar, but we're talking about something just a little bit different. The left-wing groups are primarily associate themselves with socialism, eco rights, animal rights, and anarchy. We don't want the government. We don't want any government intervention. We don't want large corporations. That's the left side. Domestically, some of those groups include the ALF, which is the Animal Liberation Front, ELF, which is the Earth Liberation Front, Common Action, which supports total anarchy. They want absolutely no rules whatsoever. They just want to live however they want to live. They just want no anarchy, no government rules whatsoever. And then on the right side of that, we have groups such as the KKK, the white supremacists, and other radical and anti-political groups. So what's the division there? Why do we say that the KKK is on the right and ALF and ELF and those guys are on the left? Well, because it relates to what they want, what they don't want. Again, on the left, it's more of a socialist, anarchist type of belief, if you will. On the right, it's more of, well, we just want to change religion and the government, and this is exactly the way we want to do it. Okay, so that's why we see that. On the right wings, a lot of the people are really conservative. They're really religious. They got some connection there to conservative sort of beliefs with those radical religious or anti-political groups that just really want to make that change and influence the government or influence from that right side, from that really conservative side. And then on the left side, we have the communist or the socialist or those people that really fight for rights. And again, to me, it's hard to really group people that way. I, for one, don't like to group people, politically, but that's just how it is. Okay, one of the things that we see in this, when we talk about the groups, we also need to remember the lone wolves. Okay, there's a lot of lone wolf terrorists, individuals that are sympathetic to a cause, but they're really not associated with any particular one group or organization. We see that, and that lone wolf really could not just be one person, but could be a friend. It could be one or two persons, like we saw in the Boston bombing, for example. They had ideals, they were sympathetic to the cause, whatever the cause may be, and they went out and carried out an attack. So let's not forget about the lone wolves. Okay, all right. I hope I didn't ramble there. I just want to give you just a little bit of overview about what we did last week, what we're doing this week. Just kind of touch upon that. So let's talk a little bit about the final. I'm working on today, trying to put together an opportunity for us all to get together online so that we can meet. I'll try to get that out to you as soon as I can. I'm going to try to get that for next week, maybe. It's important that you try to make those live meetings. Not required, but they are beneficial, and they will help you to be successful on the final. Just something to keep in mind. If you now haven't taken a look at that, please take a look at that final today and get started, because it is highly important that you take a look at that and get started today. Don't wait till that last week. Take a look at those suggestions, those tips that I've given you to be successful, including there with how to write him APA, the outlines, introduction, the body, the conclusion, etc. Each one of those should help you as well. Please, again, as I mentioned, pay close attention to the comments there that I add in your grading there in GradeMark. Hopefully, you can use those to help you improve on future assignments. That's why I do them, to help you do that. If you get behind, please let me know. If you have a family emergency, anticipate being behind, you're deployed, you get called out to an incident, just let me know, and I'll do what I can to help you there. Okay, we'll try to work with you as much as we possibly can and make things as best you can. My job is to be here for you and to help you be successful. So, thank you so much. Again, I hope I didn't just ramble, didn't want to just take up your time, but I wanted to add a little bit of information to hopefully make things better for you. I talked about last week, talked about this week, where we're headed. Thank you so much for the great discussions. Thank you for contributing to the extra discussions. I'm highly impressed with the work you're doing. Try to be highly involved in everything you're doing. If you have a question, you don't think I'm being involved, you think I'm missing something, anything that I can do to make your journey easier here at SNHU, please let me know. Have a great week, and I will see you later in the week in the discussion boards, and I will hopefully try to post a video on that final coming up soon. Have a great week, and thanks again for stopping by and taking your time to watch the video.